Well, training for muscle hypertrophy and training for muscular strength gains is entirely very similar in the way that they adapt and respond to training, and they honestly work very synergistically together. You can still separate these different training modalities, and I think that it's important to have the knowledge to be able to do so, so that if you want to specialize for training for strength, or you want to specialize for training for hypertrophy or muscle enlargement, you can do so by manipulating these training variables in your own way. So today I will provide the knowledge that you will require in order to manipulate your own training to get the most out of the goals that you want to get. So let's start with strength training, which is basically your body's neurological adaptations to lifting heavy weights. By increasing these adaptations over time, you will become stronger and be able to lift heavier weights. Now, this goes hand in hand with hypertrophy, because when you can lift heavier loads, that will increase your total amount of training volume, and thus will increase the amount of hypertrophy yielded from your strength training. So to start, strength training is essentially lifting very heavy weights, specifically lifting 70% of your 1 rep max or higher for a given movement for around 3 to 5 repetitions. Now, it doesn't have to be specifically 3 to 5 repetitions. You can go as low as 1 repetition or as high as around 6 or so. But 3 to 5 is a very good range, because 1 repetition can increase injury risk, whereas the higher you go, the lower the percentage of intensity you can handle for the given repetition. So 3 to 5 reps, 70% of your 1 rep max or higher. And then typically you want higher rest intervals, around 3 to 5 minutes, or typically as long as it takes you to fully recover and be able to produce 100% force output on the next set. Now, you also don't want to choose too many exercises. You want between around, and again, this is a range, but 3 to 5 exercises per session, because the more exercises you throw in there, the least likely your body will be able to neurologically adapt to the given training stimulus. So the more that you throw at it, the least ability it's going to have to differentiate between this strength training adaptations, and the more it'll kind of go into more of a hypertrophic adaptation. So 3 to 5 exercises per session is also a good rule of thumb. 3 to 5 exercises total, 3 to 5 exercises per session. Now, in terms of the types of exercises that you should be choosing, you want anything which is a compound movement. A compound movement is more than just one joint enacting a range of motion. So for instance, a single joint movement would be something like a bicep curl. This can also be called an isolation movement. But you want a multi-joint or compound lift, which would be something like a bench press, for example, because that's using the elbow joint and the shoulder joint simultaneously to lift the object, whatever it may be, a machine, a barbell, a dumbbell. Typically, you see people using barbells a lot for their strength training, but this is more of just the traditional way that people do it. You don't actually need to exclusively use a barbell while doing strength training. You can also use a machine or a dumbbell or a cable, whatever you like to do, because your body can really cannot tell the difference between the barbell or a machine or a dumbbell. All your body knows is tension, and it adapts accordingly. So whatever thing you want to get stronger at, don't be discouraged just because it's not a barbell. Do what you like. So make sure that you're picking a compound lift, but you only really want to pick between 3 and 5. And again, that's just an average, but 3 to 5 exercises in total, and then 3 to 5 exercises per session. The reasoning for this is because if you throw too many exercises into the pot, then your body isn't going to be able to adapt to all of them simultaneously. In fact, it's going to have some issues. What's the saying? A master of everything is a master of none, or something like that. Well, it holds true when it comes to strength training. Don't overdo it, because then you are going to see really bland and suboptimal results as a consequence. So in summary, for strength training, you want to pick compound or multi-joint movements. It doesn't matter whether you're using a barbell or not, but you want to pick between 3 and 5 movements in totality and perform 3 to 5 of them per day that you're exercising. And then you want it to be 70% of your 1 rep max for that given movement, between 3 and 5 repetitions per set. And then you want around 3 to 5 minutes, or as long as it takes, to rest up fully before you enact another set. So it's really lifting at really heavy loads for a low amount of repetitions on big, challenging movements. Now, moving on to hypertrophy training, I think you'll find that hypertrophy training is really volume specific. You really need to be hammering a muscle, because as I previously mentioned, muscles only know tension. So when you add more mechanical tension to your muscle stimulus, then that will result in more growth overall. Remember, growth or muscle hypertrophy is the enlargement of muscle fibers through training, which triggers protein synthesis and triggers the building of new muscle tissues. But when it recovers, it actually over repairs and grows a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger each time. Now, I like to really highlight that training for muscular hypertrophy is a lot simpler than it is for training for strength. Training for strength is almost like a skill. You really got to hone it and learn the technique, learn the neurological adaptations. But for muscular hypertrophy, it's almost really about hammering the muscle into oblivion and letting it fully recover before hammering it again. The number one driving force of muscular hypertrophy is muscular volume. So you want between 5 and upwards of 30 repetitions per set at the gym. Now, this is such a wide range, because what is really important when it comes to muscular hypertrophy is getting between 0 and 3 reps shy of complete muscular failure. So you really want to be pushing your sets extremely hard and really giving your body a trigger for growth, a reason to grow. Now, beyond the total amount of reps and training intensely at the gym, the leading factor is actually how many sets you're doing per week per body part. Now, you want, on the minimum end, you want around 10 sets per body part per week. And on the upper end, around 20 or 25 sets per muscle group per week. Now, keep in mind, these are averages and this is a range. So your body may respond a little bit differently. But in order to trigger new adaptations, you want between 10 and upwards of 25 sets. Now, these sets, as I mentioned before, you want between 5 and 30 repetitions, but you need these sets to be really close to muscular failure. Now, the overall intensity of a set does not matter nearly as much as strength. There's not a strict cutoff of around 70% or more of your 1 rep max. You just, as I mentioned earlier, you just need to make sure that you're giving it your all and you're really, really getting close to muscular failure, between 0 and 3 repetitions shy of muscular failure, and then make sure that you're hitting that volume. In terms of rest periods, the rest period does not matter as much. You just need to be able to get back to muscular failure quickly. So I'd say just rest in as much as you need. I'd probably recommend around 5 to 8 movements per body part, or in total per given training session, and then probably around 2 to 3 movements per body part in that given training session. And as far as using single joint or multi-joint movements, I would have a mixture of both, because at the end of the day, you really want to get different training stimuluses for hypertrophy and different angles. Training a given body part at different angles can matter a lot too when enacting a stimulus for growth. The way that muscular hypertrophy works is once you are fully recovered, there is no need to not train the muscle again. In fact, you are just wasting time if you're not going to train the muscle again. You wouldn't just train a muscle one time a week and then wait a full 7 days before training again, because it is likely done recovering after 2 days post training. Therefore, you should likely be doing a frequency, aka how many times you're training a given body part, of 2 times per week. So, for example, if you hit chest on Monday, you would probably hit it again on Thursday, because by Wednesday or Thursday night, it is likely fully recovered. So hitting a muscle 2 times a week is going to give you a good middle ground for training frequency and enable the most results over time that you can enact. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do higher frequencies of around 3 or 4 times per week, but I would just caution you to be careful, because you need your total volume to align across the week. So there you have it. Those are the key differences between strength and hypertrophy training. In short, strength training is a skill and it is very specific. You need to follow certain parameters, such as only choosing a small subsection of multi-joint or big compound lifts and training them heavy for low reps per set with long rest periods, whereas muscular hypertrophy is more about the total volume of between 10 and 25 sets per week per body part. You can really get creative with your training using a mixture of single joint and multi-joint exercises, as long as you are hitting a frequency of around 2 to 3 times per week per body part. So I encourage you guys to really hone in on what you want to be training for. If you really want to focus on strength, make sure that you're hitting all these parameters. If you really want to be focusing on getting bigger and getting some muscular size, make sure that you're hitting the hypertrophy parameters. If you want to do both, make sure that you highlight your strength training first in the session, and then you can touch on some hypertrophy movements later on. The fun part about training is that you can get creative with your program, so I suggest that you guys really do so, because at the end of the day, having fun in the gym is going to mean more adherence, more consistency, and more gains overall.